Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1998 Disney comedy film Meet the Deedles. Now, Meet the Deedles is known as one of Disney's most financially unsuccessful films of the 1990s and as a rather infamous flop, financially as well as critically. Roger Ebert hated this film. Apparently, he hated it almost as much as North. And considering how much that he hated that movie, that's saying a lot. But Meet the Deedles is a film that I've never hated. I used to watch this on TV when it would air on the Disney Channel when I was a kid, and I went into it with very low expectations when it comes to revisiting this film after all these years, and I still had some fun with it. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a classic or this is some undervalued, underrated gem of a movie. I'm not going to argue that. It's not a great film. But I could enjoy it as a time waster because I genuinely like the two leads, Paul Walker and Steve Van Wormer, and I think it's got a really great cast. You got John Ashton from Beverly Hills Cop. You got AJ Langer from People Under the Stairs. You've also got Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself in this, and Dennis Hopper. So yeah, I think Meet the Deedles is honestly a film that's a little bit better than its reputation might suggest. I don't think it's nearly as awful and unwatchable as other people make it out to be. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, though, I would like to give a shout out to Ryan for requesting this review. Meet the Deedles is directed by Steve Boyum. And Steve Boyum, he hadn't really directed a whole lot before this. And I'm not going to say that the direction is something that is going to provide a wave of applause or accolades, but it is the kind of direction that I think is decent. And I think he captures the cartoonish, zany vibe and style of the film rather well. It's a movie that, in a lot of ways, is just a live action cartoon. And I think the direction captures that vibe for the most part pretty well. The camera angles definitely do emphasize the silly nature of it. The different camera techniques also provide an extra over the top comic cartoon kind of flair and overall feel to the film visually. And I think some of the pratfalls and the slapstick definitely is enhanced by the direction because the director is willing to have fun with the camera angles or have fun with the camera techniques in order to create some fun comic visuals and some nice visual gags here and there. And you can see why this is a director who became a go-to for Disney for a while when it comes to a lot of their Disney Channel original movies. Because I think he definitely knew how to create a film visually that's, eye-catching enough and full of enough energy that you could definitely catch the kids' attention. And no, it's not award winning. No, it's not amazing. But I think he did a decent job. He did a fine job for this kind of movie, which is just a dumb, silly comedy. The film is written by Jim Herzfeld, and Jim Herzfeld, he built a career out of writing for sitcoms prior to writing this film. He had worked on sitcoms like The Gary Shandling Show, as well as Married with Children. And what's funny is his biggest success as a screenwriter actually happened after this movie came out. and that was Meet the Parents. So this film's failure didn't really prevent him from having what was ultimately his greatest success as a writer. And this screenplay honestly isn't even that bad to me. It's not a great script, but I don't think it's a total wipeout either. I think there are some moments where it catches the right wave, and then there's some other moments where the wave crushes this script because uh, the writer just didn't take the right angle. Now, the plot is it's pretty unoriginal in a lot of ways. It deals with two brothers named Phil and Stu who live in Hawaii, and they are a bunch of troublemakers who get into a lot of different types of shenanigans at school and with the local law enforcement. And eventually they take things too far and they get expelled from school, and their father has had enough, and he sends the Deedles to a camp to straighten them up. And this boot camp actually doesn't exist anymore because the former owner, Major Flowers, was involved in a lot of major issues involving previous camp goers. And so the parents sued him and got his camp shuttered, but he's still going to show the Deedles um, who's boss and also teach them how to be better men along the way. And I like that the script throws out a red herring here. Like it makes you think that okay, this is where it's going to go, but then it's actually not where how things are going to go. And red herring maybe isn't the right word, but it throws in a detour in a pretty clever way because I didn't see that coming. Where then the boot camp is not the plot, and they wind up uh, running into an opportunity to become park rangers for Yellowstone. And that's what the majority of the plot is at that point. Uh, they escape from Major Flowers after he drives them over a cliff. Phil and Stu, they steal some clothing because they are soaking wet after a rainstorm, and they luge to the nearby ranger station. They then collide with the sign and get knocked out. And because of the fact that they're wearing these clothes that have the names Mel and Mo on them, they're mistaken for being these park ranger recruits named Mel and Mo. And they decide to run with that lie so they can get park ranger badges and show their father that they can be responsible. And I think that's just a fun idea. It's a fun fish out of water concept to take these two surfer bros and then put them into the wilderness and have them learn how to be park rangers. And Phil and Stu are, in my opinion, a pretty likable, fun duo. I don't understand the hatred a lot of critics had for these two. No, they're not Bill and Ted, and no, they're not uh, uh, Wayne and Garth. And no, they're not, the duo from Dumb and Dumber either, but they're not insufferable in my eyes. I think they're likable enough. The dialogue that they have is fun. There's actually some lines on more than one occasion that made me chuckle. They have their own dialect in a way that makes it sound different than something from Bill and Ted. It doesn't make it sound like it's just Bill and Ted, but surfer dudes, at least not to me personally. And I just I like the fact that Stu is actually a little bit of a nerd too. He's kind of like Donatello from the Ninja Turtles, just finding a way to do all these things, and he's smarter than he looks. And I like the romance that eventually builds up between Phil and Jesse. I think it's actually rather sweet, and I think the cantankerous dynamic between Phil and Stu and their captain, Captain Douglas Pine, is also rather effective. And the villains are great. I mean, the main villain is a former he's a disgraced former park ranger named Frank Slater, and he's decided that he's going to get revenge on Pine and on Yellowstone for him being uh, thrown out of Yellowstone and stripped of his captain uh, uh, badge as a park ranger. And his plan is to use these prairie dogs to wreak havoc on Yellowstone. And that's just part of his plan, because his major plan is to uh, stop Old Faithful and divert Old Faithful's geyser water to his own geyser. So then he can create his own Yellowstone that's better and called Slater Stone. And Slater lives underground, and he's watching all the havoc and the chaos that his prairie dogs are doing to Yellowstone. And the prairie dogs are what the Deedles are supposed to stop. And Slater also has a couple henchmen who work for him, and Nemo and Crab. And one of the henchmen, Nemo, is actually played by Robert Englund. So this film features the only time that Robert Englund and Dennis Hopper shared the same screen together. And I think the script does a good job making these characters fun. Like, they're fun bad guys. They get involved in some slapstick and, pratfalls and stuff like that. But I do feel that Slater was a formidable enough threat, and he was likable enough, as well as his henchmen, that you wanted to see him get defeated in the end. So a lot of the core elements of a decent enough plot are there with Meet the Deedles. And I think that there's some ingenuity in the script too. The Deedles have some fun tricks that they use, their own bit of tech that's kind of fun, like their suitcase that they can use to make a special mixed drink. And I like the fact that this is a screenplay that has some clever satire in it. It actually satirizes Disney tropes on more than one occasion. And that's very refreshing to see in a Disney movie. And it also has clever references to other Deke Entertainment or Hanna-Barbera properties, like Yogi Bear and Scooby-Doo. And the pop culture stuff isn't too dated to me or too jarring in terms of some of the references that it makes. So why does this not ultimately rise above average, though? Why does it wipe out? Why does it have these moments where it just can't ride the wave? And I think it really has to do with the humor. There are some jokes, there are some satire elements that are genuinely funny, but there's other dialogue that'll make you cringe or make you roll your eyes. And there's a lot of childish, puerile humor, like fart jokes and people pooping themselves. And that is something that to me just isn't that funny. And there's a lot of stuff where you have different characters just yelling Deedles at the top of their lungs as if it's comedy gold. And there's a weird thing where Phil and Stu are supposed to be into eating food straight from nature, and the writer interprets that as them eating bugs and pine cones instead of them just being vegetarians. And there's some other stuff too that's just kind of odd and just feels like it's tacked on just for the sake of there being something silly, like this group of animals, wild animals that escapes from a Bavarian circus. So you have a bear and a lion, and I think there's supposed to be Disney references as well because the bear actually has a hat on it, and at one point, one of the Deedles mentions Baloo, mentions an elephant named Dumbo, but beyond the surface level stuff, there's really not a lot of material that is really gleaned or provided with the animals that have escaped. And it is a movie that has a lot of just very unrealistic, silly logic behind it. And that can add to its creativity, but it also can hurt the overall immersion of it. But really, my biggest problem with this script and with the film is the fact that it's not really that funny. There's potential to be funny, but a lot of the time it doesn't ride that wave, and it just crashes. And it's too bad because I do think that despite its reputation, despite the fact that critics like Roger Ebert hated this movie, I do think that this script and this film as a whole is actually something that had potential to be a cult classic, because I think the deals are enjoyable or likable enough leads. I think the romance between Phil and Jesse is effective and charming and sweet. I think the whole plan from the villains is outlandish and crazy enough that it's honestly unique in its own way. I mean, the fact that in order to be able to control the prairie dogs, Slater uses a machine that inserts kibble into the ground. I think that's pretty cool. Like a kibble drill, that's a fun idea. Yeah, and that's also used by the Deedles to uh, take out the two henchmen so then they can stop Slater and his plan from creating Slater Stone. And there's actually some adult comedy in this too. There are some innuendos, some adult jokes. For instance, the whole model of Slater Stone actually has a mock up that shows an adult bookstore. So there are some moments in this script where I think it shines. I honestly wonder what this might have been like if it wasn't held back as much, if it was allowed to be a little more edgy, even edgier, instead of being, just a safe film, a goofy little movie for kids. But there's enough originality, there's enough uniqueness in this that I still like the script. I just don't love it because it is first and foremost a comedy, and there are some clever bits and some moments where it's humorous, but a lot of the time it's just not that funny at all. The cast, honestly, I think is a major highlight for this film. Paul Walker, I think he actually does a good job as Phil Deedle, the dopey but charming and good-looking brother. Uh, Definitely given me a little bit of Alex Winter vibes at points. Uh, I think it was a role that he actually handled well. It was fun to see Paul play a role like this and not be so serious and play a guy who's not really that cool, but his confidence in himself makes up for it. And I liked Steve Van Wormer as Stu. I liked his line delivery. I liked his overall performance, and I think that him and Paul Walker had some really good chemistry. And I bought that the two were brothers. John Ashton was good as Captain Pine. If you want a prickly guy, he's definitely near the top of the list when it comes to that kind of character. AJ Langer was just gorgeous. She was so just beautiful in this. And I've always liked AJ Langer from all the way back to her time in People Under the Stairs. I thought she was fantastic in that film. And she was also in Escape from LA, and it was nice to see AJ Langer in this, and I felt she did a really good job with her character, and I thought that she and Paul Walker had great chemistry too. Uh, Robert Englund was a blast. It was like he was channeling his character from Ford Fairlane again, and so it was really fun to see him play that kind of role and to see him work alongside Richard Lineback and Dennis Hopper. And speaking of Dennis Hopper, I think he got nominated for like one of the worst performances that year. I don't see it. I know a lot of people don't really like his performance in this, and I don't understand why. It's vintage Dennis Hopper. You can tell that he's having fun with it, and as a result, I really enjoyed his scenes in the movie. It's kind of like if his character for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 somehow survived and then went totally off the deep end. That's really what his performance is in Meet the Deedles as Frank Slater. You also have some good small roles as well by Eric Braeden, who plays Phil and Stu's father, MC Gainey, who plays Major Flowers, and also Bart the Bear in his last major role because he got very ill after this and then wound up passing away a couple years later. The cinematography is by David Hennings, and I think he did an honorable job with it. The editing is by Alan Cody, and I don't think it's an astonishing feat. I don't think it's amazing, but I don't think it's a total bummer either. And the music is by Steve Bartek, and that one that that is definitely a piece and a part of this film that helps add to its overall vibe and its fun atmosphere and the laid back feel of the film. And I think Bartek definitely nailed that. But when it comes to music, I would say the soundtrack is more memorable. There's actually some really good songs in this soundtrack by the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Goldfinger, uh, Radish, uh, Hepcat, Save Ferris, Dance Hall Crashers, and Homie. And Homie is a band. It's a super group that had Rivers Cuomo from Weezer and Greg Brown, who was a member of Cake, Matt Sharp, who was from Weezer, and Adam Orth of Shuffle Puck, and Yuval Gabe of Soul Coughing and Sulfur. And this was a project that they were going to do. They were going to do an album. And then for whatever reason, the only thing that came out of this collaboration between these musicians was a song for Meet the Deedles of all things. And it was a song called American Girls, and it played during the end credits, and it's a great song. So yeah, that's definitely a pretty positive and, in my opinion, great aspect of Meet the Deedles is the soundtrack. I think even if people don't like the movie, which I can understand why, I think they could definitely enjoy songs like American Girls by Homie. Only other thing I really want to mention about the movie is some of the visual effects, because some of the visual effects were really jarring and really poor. There's some really bad green screen in this. There's a shot of John Ashton falling out of a helicopter that looks just about as bad as the shot at the end of RoboCop when uh, uh, Ronnie Cox's character Dick Jones is shot out the window. It honestly looks that bad. So, yeah, there's some moments visual effects wise where this film really crashes out. But overall, it's a fun time waster for me. I like the two leads, but at the same time, I like Bill and Ted inspired movies. I've always liked these kind of films. I like Dude, Where's My Car? And I like Wayne's World and Dumb and Dumber. And this isn't on par with any of those movies, but it's still got that same kind of endearing, fun vibe to it with these two guys who have good chemistry and are just fun to be around. And the addition of Robert Englund and Dennis Hopper to the cast just makes it all the more unique and interesting to me. And it definitely has the overall feel and vibe of a big budget Disney original movie. If you grew up watching Disney Channel original movies like I did, this is very much something that is right along those lines. Like, what if you had a film like that, but it had a budget? That's what Meet the Deedles is. And it makes sense why it aired so much on the Disney Channel, because it honestly felt right at home with a lot of those other Disney Channel original movies. And that's why the director Steve Boyum went on to do so many of them. He did Johnny Tsunami. He did Stepsister from Planet Weird. He did Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. He did Motocrossed. You know, he did uh, a large chunk of those Disney Channel original movies, and Johnny Tsunami is a fun one. That's definitely one of the better ones. And Johnny Tsunami actually had Steve Van Wormer in the cast, which was a fun thing to see. So, yeah, it's silly. Yes, it's goofy. Yes, it's very dumb. And it is very much just a live action cartoon. But I think if you're in the right mood for it, if you can just turn your brain off, I think you could actually have some fun with this. Despite the fact that there's going to be a large chunk in the movie where the laughs are few and far between. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on Meet the Deedles. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.